stigma-free zone, so we want to invite all of you into our stigma-free zone today. There are no auditions, there are no fees. We have removed the barriers to entry. I know you can all sing. So, we would love to have you sing with us or play an instrument with us. We have a chorus, an orchestra, and a 35-piece flute choir here in Boston, making music every week. And so we're really delighted to just take a quick moment to sing one song for you this morning. This is the Me Too Chorus, conducted by Sarah Mitchell with our pianist Daniel Nerger, and they're going to sing Be the Light. Thank you.
And then a handicap accessible one in the office. If needed, there are other restrooms downstairs. We've got a lot of good stuff that are coming. Our friends at William James are here to actually share their wisdom. And so that's it. I know Fumi is gonna come up. So just a real quick run of the day. And your program actually has our schedule. There is going to be a panel here, and then we're gonna have breakout rooms throughout the sanctuary. At the end of the panel, we'll let you know where they are so you can take part. And again, I am going to stop talking now, and I would like to bring up the lead pastor of Union United. What is it, Union Combined Parish? I forget now.
Come on, put your hands together for Crystal and for yourselves. Come on, make a little bit of noise. It's good that you are here. I'm Jay Williams. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the lead pastor of the Union Combined Parish. We are a multi-site congregation with presence in the West End, in Brighton, and West Roxbury, and of course here in the South End. So you're in Union Church. The story of our congregation is over 200 years old. but just want to say welcome to this place. This building is about 150 years old, and it holds a deep story that's grounded in our congregation's witness and commitment to love and liberation. And I think we were delighted. Crystal is a member and one of our lay leaders here at Union, and when she reached out to ask if we would host, the answer was of course, right? Because our commitment to love and liberation is deeply interwoven with what we're going to do here today, that we might love ourselves enough to take care of ourselves fully, to prioritize our well-being, physical, spiritual, and mental, so that we might be freed to live good lives. I know we're not in Sunday church, but let the church say amen, right? Right, Toni Morrison, one of my inspirations, you know, in Song of Solomon, at the conclusion said it this way: if you want to fly, you got to give up the shit that's weighing you down, right? Right. So I think that's what this work on today is all about. Quick word about this space, because you know a lot of history has happened here. We moved to this building from Roxbury in 1949. The keynote speaker for the day was Mary McLeod Bethune, the aunt to our pastor at the time. And of course, you know Mary McLeod Bethune, president to advisor. The next year in 1950, we hosted the NAACP convention that voted to pursue Brown versus the Board of Education. 1966, we hosted one of the sacred jazz concerts for Duke Ellington. So a lot of wonderful witness has happened in this space. So we're delighted that you are here as we continue to do the work of shaping our present, grounded in our history, that proclaims well that we deserve to be well. We deserve to be free. So welcome to Union. Who's next? Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay. All right. What a joy to be here today. I feel so inspired by this space and the history that comes out of this space. And our folks from Me Too Orchestra are not here. But one of the things that resonated with me today is their song about being the light. And that's what we're here to do today. Huge thank you to our Chief of Staff, Crystal Cormier, and Dr. J. Williams for the inspiring word, and also giving us the opportunity to be here in this warm and beautiful space. This setting captures what today is all about. It's about connection, community, and honest conversation. I also want to recognize our partners from William James, Dr. St. Louis, and all our partners from William James, Dr. Gary Bailey from Siemens University, and the incredible presenters and vendors and all of our DMH staff and community allies that have helped to bring today to life. Thank you. You make this gathering possible. For those that do not know me, I am Dr. Fumi Agocha. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Behavioral Health Promotion and Prevention, and we go by OBHPP. And if you're not familiar with us, that is okay, because we're relatively new, launched in June of 2024. Our office was created by law, and our mission is simple but yet powerful. We're here to promote mental health, prevent mental illness and substance use before the start, addressing challenges like suicide, violence, prevention, as well as reducing stigma head on. Our vision is to make mental health part of everyday conversation, just as we have conversations about our physical health, right? That is something that I think we're still trying to grapple with. How do we talk about mental health without feeling the stigma around it? How can we reduce stigma, and how can we make it about building stronger and kinder and connected communities? Our office may be new, but our purpose is really clear, and progress is already on the way. We just recently launched a grant opportunity of about $3 million to build community organizations that wants to do this work. So if you're aware of any organizations that are doing work in the space of behavioral health promotion and prevention, please spread the word. We still have until November 17th for the deadline of submitting your application. The other thing that I want to mention today is that we've started a statewide campaign called What's on Your Mind. And this will be popping up on your social media, on radio station, on TV, on transit across the Commonwealth. And this is an opportunity to spark real conversation about mental health and helping people improve their wellness and learning how to take care of themselves day in, day out. You can learn more about this on mass.gov/what's on your mind. And it should show up on the screen in a moment. But our work is just getting started, and the need is really clear, because we know that half of the people living with mental health condition never seek help. And why? Because of stigma, misunderstanding that still gets in the way. And that's why we're here today, to demystify mental health. And this matters at the core of who we are within our communities, realizing that mental health is not just about the absence of illness. It has an emotional, psychological, and social dimension. It's our ability to handle life ups and downs and showing up for ourselves and others and contributing to our families and communities. Yet often stigma keeps the story quiet, like the story of a family friend of mine who had the onset of mental health breakdown in college, and he chose the path of substance use because he wouldn't speak about it. And these stories are common. We can say they are not uncommon, they are common. And how do we reduce that? Is by creating a space that we have today and having this conversation. So we are so lucky to have such a wide range of perspective and experience in the room. So let's listen closely, engage deeply, and if you feel moved, I encourage you to speak up. Share your stories, ask questions, connect with someone new. And as we move through today's session, I invite you to think about this. What does demystifying mental health and breaking down stigma looks like in your world, in your home, in your school, in your workplace, in your neighborhood? And what does it look like when we collectively promote mental wellness? At OBHPP and DMH, we are committed to this work, but we know we can't do it alone. So it takes partnership like this, community, and courage. So thank you again for spending your Saturday here with us and showing up, speaking up, helping to build a future where mental health is understood, supported, and embraced. And so I am delighted to be here today. So thank you for joining us. And I'll now transition to our next session, which is our panel discussion, handing it over to Dr. Natalie Court.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Natalie Court. I'm an associate professor of clinical psychology at William James College. I'm also the director of our Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health. And today, my colleagues and I, who will introduce themselves in just a minute, we'll be talking about ways that we can reduce the stigma that was mentioned earlier that is particularly common in many of our communities, especially those communities that have been historically marginalized, discriminated, neglected in the mental health field. We want to really spotlight some of the challenges that occur in those communities. And let me take a seat. Actually, get cozy. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shawnee Turner to introduce herself and the program that she runs within the Multicultural Center, and then we'll progress through the rest of you.
Hello, like she said, my name is Dr. Shawnee Turner. I am the director of our African and Caribbean Mental Health Concentration under the Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health.
Hello, is it on? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Catherine Buki, and I'm the director of the Asian Mental Health Program.
And good afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Jill Bloom, and I'm director of the Global Mental Health Program. Delighted to be here.
Okay, so for those of you who might not be familiar with William James College, I think it might be helpful just to get the context in terms of why we're here today and what we're going to be talking about. William James College, which is located in Newton, Massachusetts, happens to be one of the largest regionally accredited academic institutions that graduate individuals with degrees in psychology and mental health counseling. We are responsible for graduating the largest number of mental health providers in the New England area. And that's pretty significant. That really highlights that this is a college with a pretty outsized impact on many, many communities in Massachusetts, in New Hampshire, in Maine, in Connecticut, etc. So as a consequence, we recognize that we have a singular responsibility to ensure that our mental health field looks more like the general population. So 10 years ago, we started our center with the mission of diversifying our student body and focusing on addressing the disparities that have been so burdensome to so many communities that have already been burdened and made vulnerable through decades and centuries of marginalization. So we created a number of different programs in our center to make sure that we focus attention on that particular mission that I just mentioned. So today, we are joined by these three amazing, talented individuals who are so committed to social justice. And I have a number of questions for them to help us think about the challenges, especially stigma, that have impacted many communities, and figure out ways to reduce the stigma that have been barriers. So my first question to our panel is, I'd love for each of you to briefly share with the audience your personal as well as professional perspective on some of the unique challenges and barriers that exist in the mental health system, which have been particularly impactful in the lives of communities of color as well as marginalized communities. Dr. Turner.
You want me to go first, huh? For me, as a girl, woman, born and raised in the Boston area, born and raised in Roxbury. So for me, getting this degree and what I could do with this degree was all about what I grew up around, what I saw in my community. I went to New Mission High School, so I know what it's like living in the city. And I know what those kids need, what their parents need. And I think that there's still a lack of understanding and information when it comes to just basic mental health, how to access mental health, how to access quality care. You would think that that's still not something that is a barrier, but just getting quality care, getting care that is translated in the language that you speak, that you can see a clinician or mental health provider that looks like you, that understands the barriers, the disparities that happen when you are in an inner city. I think that that's still something that is very clear, a divide within the mental health field. And I think it's why you talk about our center, right? Why you talk about the work that we do. As the director of the African and Caribbean Mental Health Concentration, I teach the intro class. I also teach the mental health disparities class. And it is about making sure that our next generation of mental health providers don't misunderstand those barriers, don't misunderstand those disparities, and that they are validating the experiences and understanding the experiences so that they can reduce that stigma, that they're not naive because they didn't grow up in that space, that they understand still, and can put themselves in the client's shoes and understand their perspective. I think that it's such a disservice if we let them get out of graduate school and we don't give them that perspective, because they continue to perpetuate that they can't meet the needs of the community and they can't meet the needs of varying communities. It's one thing for me as a mental health provider to be able to go back to Roxbury and do that work, but I've been trained to be able to work across lines, right? And so that's one of the things I think is near and dear to me about my personal mission as a psychologist, is making sure any of the students that cross the hold into any of the classes that I teach, that they are understanding that it's their job, it's their responsibility as a provider, that they do understand to work across those lines.
Well, it's hard to follow that. So I am a Vietnamese refugee that came with my family in the early 70s, and that has played a very big part of my identity and my upbringing. And so when I came into this field, I saw the need in my community, but there were not enough providers, anyone that would actually want to go into mental health, right? My parents wanted me to be a doctor, a real doctor, but to go into the mental health field, that was something that was a big taboo. And so, like you said, when I came to this field, I thought it was an obligation, responsibility to learn about mental health care and then give back to my community. And being one of the only Vietnamese-speaking psychologists in New England for many, many, many years. So coming into William James and starting this Asian mental health program, I really feel like I am giving back, because it's a way to attract, retain, recruit students who want to come into the field and who are bilingual. But at the same time, there's simply not enough of us. There's simply not enough mental health providers in general. And so when I teach some of my courses as well, with the intro course or into clinical work with Asian Americans, I'm reaching out to students of every background to say, at one point, you will have an Asian American person in front of you. And so the exposure really is, how do you provide that cultural sensitive care? What are the issues that you need to be aware of? The history around Asians coming to this country, of discrimination and racism, and how are you prepared to give the best care? Because again, the students coming through, you will at one point have someone that's Asian American in front of you.
Okay. I would say, as a white woman, I've felt that it's my responsibility, and I've really dedicated my career to educating in the field of psychology about the underserved. And the goal of, and a focus of global mental health is to make mental health relevant, accessible, meaningful to underserved populations, both local and global, and also to make, to really, in some ways, decode and redefine some of the concepts. One concept, for an example, is mental health. Mental health is not a concept that makes sense in many parts of the world, in almost no parts of the world, except in the West, and among many communities. And to make mental health accessible and to really raise awareness about social and emotional well-being that is less stigmatizing in many ways and needs to be very culturally based, and this is really what we teach in global mental health. And I think it is just imperative to broaden the concept of psychology and mental health beyond serving just white middle-class populations.
Thank you so much. We are really trying to spotlight issues of stigma, which show up in every community, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of socioeconomic background. But I'm curious from your perspectives, with the communities that you work with, Black, African, Caribbean communities, Asian American communities, refugees and immigrants, as you do, Jill, I would love for you guys to talk about some of the common myths that you come across, that you hear from these communities that you think have really served as significant barriers and contributors to the existing stigma around mental health issues.
Can I start? I love this question. Just because I hear this all the time, and still to this day, I was told that Asians don't have mental health challenges and issues. And do you know why? Because we're smart. That's it. All we do is focus on academics, and we try to do, go and move our careers to the top. So why would it that we need or we have mental health issues? And that is a stigma and a myth that continues and perpetuates. Because when we do promote and ask for services and advocacy, that is the thing that I keep hearing. Your students are depressed. They have anxiety. And so I think that is the one thing that we have to keep pushing, is that everyone has, everyday anxiety or depression, but how it's seen or how it's presented could be very different in different communities. But I think that is the number one thing, is that we need to stop perpetuating that belief, that particularly the community that I serve, that I hear over and over again. Because when students or when young people want to have services, they say to me, I was told I didn't need services. I was told that all I need to do was just put my head down and study and I'll be fine. And so yes, that's the one that I want to bring forward, is that we need to stop saying that.
And I just want to build on that, because in terms of the disservice that occurs to so many that are vulnerable, in this country, one of the groups that is most at risk of suicidality happen to be older Asian women. So can you imagine how that particular myth then leaves them so isolated in the most desperate of situations when they're thinking that there's no purpose in life. So us being aware of those stereotypes are really important. Dr. Bloom?
Well, I would say in working with both immigrant and refugee populations, that one very common myth is that if you have mental health or the equivalent problems, you're crazy. And that is very stigmatizing and makes it very, very hard for people to respond and seek out help. And a second is that to talk to strangers, to talk to a therapist who is outside of your community or your family, is to bring, very often to bring dishonor to yourself or your family. And so to combat both of those, I think, is really critical, and raising awareness. And that involves not just raising awareness, isn't just saying that that's not so, but partnering with local stakeholders, local community leaders, to really raise a kind of a more communal understanding of these concerns.
I think both of the ones that Joe said, that Dr. Bloom said, were the things that I were thinking about with what my students bring up, what we see in the literature. The last one being, especially in the Caribbean communities, that you don't talk to people about your personal business. What happens at home stays at home. And that is being taught to the next generation. So you now have college students that are like getting a little bit of freedom, coming out, like 18+ group, right? That are starting to come see us, but they're very cautious. Like, listen, my mom said we can't talk about this. The reason I didn't bring any of this up, the reason why I didn't tell anybody about my attention deficit, the reason why I didn't speak to anybody about my anxiety, the reason why I don't share what I'm depressed about or what my excessive thoughts or worry is because I was told at home that I couldn't. That even goes as far as in elementary school, where teachers might be trying to get services for kids, but parents are like, no, we don't need that. That's something that we don't need. And I definitely think that that's one of those stigmas where it's hard, because there's many situations that I've encountered, especially in the school setting, where I can validate that parent's concern. So I don't minimize that there are real challenges that we have with our education system where parents are afraid of trusting the system, right? That there are some of these systems that are broken, and that brokenness only perpetuates the stigma and the barriers that some of the community feels when they're trying to seek services or trying to seek support. And so while I want to combat that, I also have to validate where this comes from and the history of it, right? So that when I'm talking to a parent, I'm not leading them astray and making them think, oh, the system is always going to be there to help you. It might not, actually, right? There might be need to be a little cautious about, the way in which you go about that. That doesn't mean that you don't seek the help and support, but that you're doing it in a very mindful and being aware of the way that you're going about doing it. And I think that's where we can come into play. I think it goes back to our training and our programs and how we're helping the next generation of mental health providers be that bridge between, I like parents, so I'm always gonna have parent examples, be that bridge between the services that parents need and like the service provider.
I want to build on where you ended in terms of mistrust, because you're highlighting that many communities that have been historically excluded and marginalized, it sounds like you would perhaps suggest that they have some justifiable reasons to mistrust our healthcare system. And Dr. Vuki, I wonder if you can also speak more to this in terms of the ongoing injustices that are impacting many communities. Obviously we are in a time right now where we're seeing a lot of communities, communities of color, linguistically minoritized communities, immigrant communities that are really under the gun, so to speak. So I would love to hear your thoughts about how some of the experiences historically, as well as contemporary experiences of injustices, are influencing some of our community members' decisions to seek or to avoid mental health services today.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And we see cycles of this, and it's through a lot of political fear. And so first off, even without the fear of being arrested or deported, which a lot of the communities that I see are very fearful nowadays, I think there is, at least for the Asians that I've worked with, is that the fear, they came from a lot of communist countries. And so we're a community, so I additionally to William James College, I work at a community health center. And because we're associated with government, then the natural fear is that you will ask for my status and you will report to ICE or whatever, the government. And so we've had to do a really big push to say that we are not hard, that we won't ask for your status, but that we are here to provide care. Massachusetts has done a great job in providing insurance for everyone, for all, but for years, people will be very afraid to come in to access our service just for medical care because, again, inability to pay or the fear that when they walk through the doors, the government will also know their status. And so repeatedly, time and time again, we have to make sure to inform and educate our community that we are here for everyone. It doesn't matter what you look like, what the situation is, but we will provide care. And this is not just in the Asian community, it's many immigrant communities. And one thing that I'm hearing now is that, which I think really shook me to the core, is that community members are reporting on community members. And I was in a meeting with 10 convenient Asian health communities organizations, and they were saying that people were not coming in for services. They were too afraid. And then they followed up with, and the communities are now calling on other people, and so I think that, again, that was a very recent thing, and I think I'm sitting with that because we have done so much work to gain the trust of our community members to come in for care, and then this is what we're hearing.
Oh, gosh, that is so disquieting and sad to hear. Dr. Bloom, obviously you work closely with immigrant communities, with asylum seekers, with refugees. I wonder if you wanted to build a little bit on what Dr.
Well, I think the mistrust right now is palpable, and that I think already and I work at 2 different refugee centers with both refugees and immigrants, and what is very critical right now is the whole acculturation process is a very complicated and difficult one, particularly given the histories that one has had, and for many of the refugees, they've escaped from very difficult, conflict-ridden, politically very problematic situations that have really put their lives at risk, and coming here and now feeling that there is uncertainty about their rights. I think certainly part of the acculturation is coming to learn about the rights that one has. I know just recently in meeting with a group of the refugee community that many people are not wanting to go out of their house, and how to really raise, and I think one can understand the mistrust, but how to build on that trust is really critical. So I think we're at a very critical time, and how, again, it's I think for in different ways for both immigrants and refugees who bring their own past experiences that very much inform how they're reacting and feeling in this moment.
So Dr. Turner, Dr. Turner, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the experience of institutional racism, of racial trauma, which are significant stressors for many communities, and obviously stressors that affect our mental health. How should mental health providers themselves really tackle these issues of institutional racism, of racial trauma? What would you advise? And I have a second question for you after that.
Before, I would say, before COVID, I thought that it was to help our students in our next generation of mental health providers understand the strategies on how to have these difficult conversations in a session. Post-COVID, this new generation of student we have, I don't know what happened, but something has changed. Where, and we laugh about it, but we also, if you laugh, you understand, right? The social political climate has made it one where the students don't have the basic information and understanding of the definitions, just of racism overall. So now there's a shift in the classroom for this next generation of mental health providers that we still have to educate them. They have to understand the difference between stereotypes and prejudice. They have to understand to see a microaggression and validate that microaggression, because then they can't do it in a session. And what I have found within my experience being, a mental health provider, working in Black and brown communities, is that that is truly what we're missing in our clinical sessions with our clinicians. That as a Black woman, being able to have a provider, regardless of their ethnicity, right? But have a provider that I can come in and talk about something that happened at work with me that was a microaggression and that's validated is baseline. And that is not happening enough, right? So first we have to teach that baseline. And I think that we can't get involved. I believe, and I have to say it the way that I need to say it, I believe that we can't get in the field of psychology. We, the faculty, are responsible for teaching all of our students to be able to work with all people and be able to train them in a way that they can walk with everyone on how they think, act, and feel. Our ethics and our APA board is telling us that when we're training these next generation, that's our goal, right? And it's not, can you work with this group? Can you work with that group? Are you best at CBT? You've got to be able to work across the lines, period. It's not an option. I don't care where you went to school. That's not just a William James thing because we're at a social justice institution. That is your job and your right. If that's, I tell my students just like this, if that's not what you want to do, we need plumbers. We need plumbers and electricians. We need construction workers. We need all kinds of people to do other things. This is not the field for you. If you can't work across lines, if your values are gonna make you feel like you can't work with someone that's of the LGBTQ community, this ain't for you. That's what I tell them. And that's how you get over that. You sit in my class and I have that conversation with you, what you gonna do? Because I'm telling you, I better not catch you nowhere thinking that you're not working with this group of people. Then I say, now let's talk strategy. Now let's talk strategy. Now let's look at the evidence-based treatment. Because if you can't do that basic first, then we gotta educate you on that first.
Amen. Amen. So to build on that, I've had a practice, and I also share with my students that I oftentimes, when I have an opportunity to speak largely to communities or groups of people of color, that my advice to them with mental health providers when they first go in to see a mental health provider is to ask a simple question, which is, Dr. Court, have you been examining your racial biases lately? And I say to those audiences, and then I convey to my students that I tell audiences this, that if Dr. Court looks at you with a blank face, facial expression, or says, but seems to really struggle with even understanding the question and really struggles with the response, my suggestion is for you to grab your stuff. And sometimes I, have an alternative word, but grab your stuff and leave. Because everything I know as a researcher of racial disparities suggest that the level of care that you will be provided by that person who cannot acknowledge their internalized racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, etc., means that you will absolutely be impacted in the most negative way by that person's internalized biases that they haven't actually addressed yet. So it's actually in your best interest for you to leave if that person can't say to you, yes, I recognize that I carry biases and I do a lot of work as often as possible to address them. So, Dr. Bloom, I'm going to turn to you to further talk a little bit about the disparities that we have in our field. One critical disparity that we oftentimes see is around misdiagnosis. Obviously, that could be a huge barrier to care. If we as mental health providers are unable to accurately identify that you're experiencing major depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or panic disorder, then it's obviously the case that we can't really treat you well, so you continue to struggle. So I'm wondering, what steps do you think can be taken to ensure that there is more equitable and culturally competent diagnostic care provided to communities that have been so historically ignored by our field?
This is a topic near and dear to my heart. I've been working on a book on on cultural misdiagnosis, basically. So I think what is essential is that one cannot neglect the cultural and social context, which much diagnosis, the DSM, the diagnosis statistical manuals, are more focused on what is going on inside the body, not the person in their social cultural context. So that is critical to understand the impact of social cultural context, as well as the impact that culture has on how one experiences distress. We could talk about diagnoses are made based on symptoms, but I think it's much more useful and equitable to think about diagnoses based on distress. And distress is something that is both culturally defined, culturally responded to, and treated. And so to really understand the ways in which culture has a direct impact on how one experiences and expresses distress, and understanding what are cultural ways in which one treats that distress, not always imposing Western biological approaches. So I think that is critical. And just knowing that, in fact, there's a lot of the work that I've done as well. One can make a diagnosis, and what I've done with students is present a case and have all the symptoms the same, but then have different demographics for a white woman or a black man. And as you go through, and what is, and the research has shown this again and again, that a black man will have a much more negative diagnosis than a white woman. But there, and this goes, there are many, many ways this can be presented. But the importance of, and when I teach my students how to do a culturally informed diagnosis, there's a much, much broader scope of questions that you ask. And in bringing about these much broader questions, you also get a very different diagnosis. And the questions are about trauma history, about cultural history, about some belief systems. Once one asks questions that are part of the diagnosis, that leads to a much less severe diagnosis. So it is really critical to educate, and this, I spent a lot of time with students on educating about rethinking diagnosis.
Thank you. I want to build on that, in terms of really highlighting the importance of taking into account cultural context. We know that for many, many communities that have experienced institutional and generational discrimination, one place that they've oftentimes turned to for strength, for healing, for community, has been their faith communities, right? The church, the temple, the mosque, etc. So I'd love for you all to talk a little bit about how faith, and obviously we're in such a significant place of faith today, how might faith-based leaders and institutions more effectively support mental health wellness and reduce stigma in the congregations that they serve, in the communities that they serve? How might those individuals who are leading us in faith effectively do that job?
I can start. So 2 thoughts that came to mind. So early on in my practice, I did have a Vietnamese female came in, and she was deeply faith-filled, and she was experiencing domestic challenges, marriage challenges, and depression. And so what I wanted to do was I asked to speak to her pastor, because she said that her faith, her community was really very much important to her. And I reached out to the pastor with her permission, and he ignored me. And what he said to her, because she came back, she told me, she was told that the pastor told her, whatever the problems you have, we in the church community will pray for you and will help you. And I have faith myself, and I understood that, but at the same time, her level of depression and trauma, she needed additional care. And so that was in direct conflict with her, and they told her to stop counseling. But she deeply connected with the services at my health center, and so at the end, she actually left that church to another church that integrated mental health and faith. But one of the things that I am teaching my students, and I'm hoping with more faith-filled community, is what a lot of the immigrant believes in, like there's a Trinitarian concept, that the mind, body, spirit are one and the same. It is not separated. When I went to grad school, I was told the mind and body are separate. It didn't feel right to me. And so if we have, in our faith community, it is not, you're not weak if you seek help, if you talk outside of your family or outside the community. So I think if we embrace this concept, we're all here, mind, body, and spirit. And if one part is in pain, your whole body, your whole part is in. So I'm hoping that concept takes place, and so that it's not one against the other, but is how do we come together with the medical, mental health, and with the faith communities.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That really resonated, I think, for me. You made me think about a statement, and sometimes on a t-shirt, a statement that says, "I'm too blessed to be stressed." I oftentimes see in churches. And so, Dr. Turner, I'm wondering if you can speak to this issue too, particularly in Caribbean and African and Black communities.
Yeah, I think it's as a woman of God and a Christian, I feel like the spaces that I'm in, it is being more introduced and more welcomed, and I appreciate that. And I think it's pastors, it's faith leaders saying that these two things do coexist. Right? You can love God, you can be in prayer, but you could also be excessively worrying about something that it impacts your ability to function. And prayer, while that is good and that could be a form of your treatment and healing and self-care, there may be also the need to see your mental health provider to talk through the underlying problem that's impacting your ability to function. And I feel like in the spaces I'm in, there are more faith leaders doing something like this, allowing their space to be open to these conversations. And when they do that, they're validating someone that's sitting in a pew, that is struggling with something in isolation, but knows that this church opened up its doors and allowed, mental health providers to come in and have these conversations and hold these workshops. So they've got to care about my mental health needs. I think the more that the faith spaces are showing that they care about that, right? That they are validating that they understand, they're encouraging and opening their doors to have conversations. I think when I see it to be like truly that the pastors really get it, when someone's on staff. When someone's on staff, if you have a congregation of 100, 200, you get into the thousands, right? You go down south in some of these huge churches, mega churches, that you allow people on staff that are mental health providers, that you have rooms that are wellness rooms or quiet rooms and times for healing, right? And that you have people that work there that are going to be meeting with people in your congregation. That's the new thing. That's where we all should really be when it comes to how faith leaders are kind of looking at this, because as your congregation grows, the mental health needs of your congregation will grow. Right? And just because they sit in isolation and they don't come to you and speak to you, you should be in expectation that is happening in the pews. And so how do you give access to the services that they need? And how do you have a resource list, right? How do you ask your congregation? You'll probably have mental health providers that are right here, sitting here within your church. How do you not have them kind of giving back to the church itself? So I feel like in some of the spaces I'm in, I see that already happening, but that would be the conversation I would have with faith leaders, that it's their responsibility, I think, at this point.
Absolutely. And I think for those of us in the academic space and in the mental health field, it's also important for us to recognize that the vast majority of the clients and the patients that we see actually are coming with deep faith, right, that they're relying on every day to get through every single day. And oftentimes the way we are discussing and training many of our students who are becoming mental health providers divorces us from connecting and considering and inquiring about our clients' faith. And that's something that we have a responsibility, as you're highlighting, to really change in our classes so that our students are able to pull that into the clinical care that we're providing to clients. And I want to really build on that. We have 7 minutes left.
Can I just add one thing to that? Because I think working with refugee and immigrant communities where faith is so much a part of their lives and worlds, I really feel that mental health providers and, as Johnny is saying, and faith leaders we're working together, and we do and we need to be working together, and that, as just kind of pointing out, that what I find, and my students, and this is something we talk a lot about in working with these communities, the power of faith, and how faith provides strength, and really building on that strength as a source and resource, and that I think is really powerful.
Amen. So, talking about faith, and as you highlighted, Dr. Bloom, the fact that it can be so foundational for our emotional health, for our interpersonal wellness. I'd love for all of you to talk a little bit about ways that we can engage in protective and preventative actions to help reduce the risk of us experiencing depression or PTSD or panic disorder, etc. What might you advise and suggest for us in the room? What can we be doing more of to protect ourselves? What's the likelihood of us experiencing some of these really challenging mental health circumstances?
So one thing that keeps coming to my mind as you were speaking, Dr. Court, and one word kept coming up, connection. As we all know, I mean, it was pre-pandemic, but since the pandemic, we have become so isolated, so afraid, so disconnected from even our own family members. And just the importance of smiling at someone or saying hi, right? Because with clients, they're fearful even to make eye contact, right? Or the elderly that we know are continually isolated. And so I think the protective factor, I think, is reconnecting with one another. And whether it's just texting, calling on the phone, or doing something, or saying, hey, come out, let's go have coffee. I think we can't underestimate how much that we are isolating ourselves, and we forget. Because if no one is saying anything, then we think that you're fine, you're okay, but in actuality, there is deep, deep loneliness in our world, and I think just having that simple, making a connection.
That was actually a point I was going to make, and something that comes up again and again and again in the literature for immigrants and refugees and resettling here, but I see it daily in the work I do, of social connection. That can be make a critical difference. And in terms of, and I know often people, will ask me about working with refugees, these poor people, they must be so traumatized. And I think to understand the importance of promoting community and connection. And one person who I've done work with over the years talks about, it's very important to not underestimate people's suffering, but don't overestimate their psychopathology. And we always have to hold that in mind. People are adaptable. People, and social connection is the glue that really serves to create new ways of being, and I think to really underscore that.
When Dr. Vuki was talking, what I heard was the isolation, and I see that in our students. Sometimes the things that we're trying to teach them in the classroom, we're watching them do, and we have to help them unlearn that. So our first year students, they just came through in August, and I have a couple that I've had to go out to their car and pull them out of the car from having lunch in the vehicle, right? They won't eat in our building because they want to be by themselves. They don't want anybody to see them. I'm like, if you don't get yourself out of this car, what are you doing? You cannot go through our graduate program alone. You won't make it. You won't make it. You have to find a community. You have to find a relationship. You have to make connections, and you can't do it having lunch out there. right? So that's the first start. Well, I'm thinking about our students in this, but I'm also thinking about the concentrations. We do a lot of what I call fellowship, right? We have a lot of fellowship within our concentrations. We create a lot of environments because we know how necessary it is for them to have community, for them to see each other, for them to have conversations with each other and say, I'm going through that class, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. A lot of our students are not from the New England area. So they move here, and it's a cultural shock for them. The prices itself, right? Like driving around, finding parking around here. There's a lot that they go through in coming here for graduate school, and they can't go through that in isolation. So the same thing we're trying to teach them, we want them to be able to teach that to their clients. And I believe, yes it was. I believe that, that's necessary for our students to understand that so that they can be the next generation teaching those skills to the community. And the fellowship, the opportunity to connect and be together, to share a meal. In the African and Caribbean communities, cookouts and having a time to celebrate with food is necessary. It's wholesome, it's necessary, it's warm. I can think back to my graduate school years and just going home to have a cooked meal. And what that's your decompressing, right? So we're trying to offer that, and I believe you when you say, post-COVID, we've lost a little bit of that we've done everything online, we've done everything in isolation. We've even forgotten how it's necessary to walk outside. You and I will have meetings and we'll be walking just to get some sun and get out of the office, get into that routine of being out before the seasonal depression kicks in, right? And it's dark at 4 o'clock. It's important for all of us to kind of recognize that. So those are the things that I would say.
Absolutely, and I'm so happy that you talked about walking. Because I was thinking about that. I actually talked to 3 of my students last week about blood pressure, their blood pressure, their very high blood pressure, and how important it is to ensure that we're also engaging in some level of movement. And thinking about our sleep and thinking about what we're putting in our bodies, because that is, as Dr. Vicky was highlighting, it's all connected. It's all connected, so we have to pay attention to all of it. And when we talk about self-care, to really actually live that and see that as an incredibly necessary value for us to experience, but also to model for others. Thank you guys so much for our fellowship and community here today. So we'd love to open it up to all of you. If you have any questions or thoughts about what we've been sharing today, we would welcome your questions. So feel free to stand and share your thoughts and perspectives.
Kids that experience mental health challenges. I am from Latin America. I did grow up with a lot of stigma. It wasn't recognized that, even in my own family, that mental health did exist. We did pray a lot, and prayer was supposed to magically, cure our pain and all of that. So to me, I truly appreciated that you opened the door for those conversations, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you very much. I'm also from, where are you from in Latin America? I'm from Guyana. I thought you were just going to say South America.
Hi, everyone. Such a wonderful panel. I love this conversation. I just have a question in terms of just the cultural competency aspect, and how are you teaching your students? And this would be helpful for me too, in terms of hearing, yes, you're the stigma around you might be crazy, right? We hear that, but then there's the other stuff, like someone else did it, it's magic, it's voodoo, like things like that. So when we're thinking about some of the other cultural like norms that come with mental health challenges, like how are you, or have you ever had an experience where you had to like inform the students on how to approach those situations?
When you were talking, one of the things that you said, voodoo, it popped my mind in 3 different directions. I've definitely had students that have done their dissertations on voodoo practices and how that shows up in the mental health space. But to just back up on your first point, which I think was the cultural competence, like how are we teaching that and what that looks like in the classroom, I think was the first question. I am the course lead for our diversity course in the clinical program, and that is imperative. As long as they keep allowing us to keep teaching this as a foundational course that all our students have to go through, it is structured in a way that allows them to see themselves and examine their own value and biases before they step into the space of the actual client. And I think that's where that cultural competence kind of comes into play. And like I had said before, I think that there's a lot of education that's still happening, right? Because I don't think that this was happening before COVID, I would say. But right now, what we're up against is that students are coming in and not receiving any of this in undergrad. This is not being talked about in undergrad. They can get through the whole undergraduate education, not taking that diversity course, not being able to be challenged in any aspect, and then they come to us and we're like, oh, okay, we want to teach you to work with all these people. So we are faced with foundationally really teaching some core concepts in a diversity course before they get to our concentrations. Then the fun happens, I believe, right? Then we close the door and I call it Vegas. What happens in here stays in here, right? Because we're gonna have all these conversations. They're gonna be uncomfortable, because if you are uncomfortable, that lets me know you're ready to step into a space where your client may be the one uncomfortable. If you can't sit with discomfort, then we got some more wrestling to do. Because you are going to see clients that are gonna walk through the door, and because of your presentation, because of who you are, they may be uncomfortable, right? And so when I can teach a student to have to sit with that and wrestle with that and work through their own biases and still be able to show up in a professional way and deliver quality care, culturally competent care, not be challenged or dismissed by the client that has some wrestling to do. This is their space. They should be able to wrestle in the clinical space with you, right? But it's our job as the professional to show up and work through that with them. That takes some time when we're starting at baseline in a 5-year program with them just understanding core concepts. So I think that that's what we offer in our concentrations, is this specialized training where we can dive deep. Now, we don't have access to all the students in our school, but once they get to us in our concentrations, we're diving deep into a specialty that allows them to see how voodoo is showing up in that space. How are you going to have that conversation? And that's what we can do in our concentrations.
And I would add to that, I think that the concentrations really do provide a much more in-depth exploration in theory, in practice, but also we have immersion programs that are very critical to transformative learning as it's often experienced. So we have both local and international immersion programs where students go to, Natalie just led one in Ecuador, in Guyana. We have one in Ecuador, one in Kenya. We've had them for many years, Dr. St. Louis and I, in Haiti and Vietnam. We've had one in South Africa. So we do, and then we have local programs. I direct one working with refugees. There is one working in the Latinx community, working in the Vietnamese community. So these are ways that one gets a very immediate and really quite jolting and transformative understanding of culture. And I think that's critical.
So, we use these terms, cultural competence. And, for me, this is about humility, right? This is simply about knowing that you don't know everything, right? And embracing your ignorance, right? And then being curious
to know more, right? So you're wanting to ask more. So I tell my students just a brief little story to illustrate that to them. So I share with them a story I came across years ago of an anthropologist doing some work with an African tribe, and he was spending some time with the tribesmen. The tribesperson received a phone call, and as he's listening to this phone call, it's clear that he's getting really agitated by what he's hearing on the other end. When he hangs up, the anthropologist inquires about why he's so agitated and clearly upset. The tribesperson then says to him, there's a woman in the village who is talking in tongues, and she's just sacrificed a goat. And as he's saying it, again, he's very visibly upset by this information he's just heard. And the anthropologist is quite puzzled by his upset, and he says, I don't understand why you're so upset, because in your village, people do talk in tongues. People do sacrifice goats. And the tribesperson responds, yes, we do, but she's doing it at the wrong time, right? And again, this is about asking questions, right? To understand what's the context of a behavior, right? You mentioned voodoo. You know, in many parts of the foundational aspects of voodoo is really about relying on your ancestors, right? Relying on the wisdom of your ancestors to help you be right. But how do you distinguish that your client is relying truly on their ancestors versus experiencing an auditory hallucination that's really a sign of a brain disorder? Right? You have to ask questions. You have to understand the context. You have to be humble enough to know that, oh, I might need to talk to somebody who has some expertise on voodoo, right? You have to then be curious to ask questions. So that's what I would say to you in your response.
We gotta walk before we run, right? Thank you all so much. I'm so appreciative. I wanted to come back to earlier musings on fellowship and the importance of community and relationships, connections, right? Not eating lunch in your car. Heard. I have PTSD, and with it, a sensory disorder. I have the service dog here with me so that nobody can get too close to me by accident, so that I don't, lose it and pass out on the floor. And I'm currently in an IOP program, which for those of y'all who don't know is a few days a week I go into a mental health services center to learn skills, therapy, all that good stuff. And I'm there with other folks right now who also have similar sensory-related disorders for our mental illnesses. And what I'm wondering is, how do we, those of us who have those disorders, gather in fellowship and be close to people and, be in rooms with lights and crowds and smells and sounds and food and folks with different cultural understandings of physical distance between standing when we speak to each other, folks who want to, put their hand on your shoulder because it's comfort, right? Like, how do we gather in fellowship in a way that has that kind of cultural competency?
Well, I was talking through what you were saying, and I was like, oh, I would go to the program. The program that you're in, where there are other people that are having similar, maybe not the exact same, but similar, that would be a wonderful thing to bring to the program. Like, hey, we want to be able to do something like this. How can you help? Do you have the space for that? Can you create a group that maybe meets, you know, after work or on the weekends or something, where we can start small, right? Maybe it's 6 people, maybe it's 4 people that could be at that facility meeting to be able to share a meal, and it's just an hour, it's 45 minutes. I think that I can imagine that if I were running something like a program like this and my participants came to me and said, hey, we would like this, I'm all over it. Like, you feel that that would help you? Absolutely. How can I make that work? What grant money do I have that would be able to do that? How much do I need? Do I have the space, or do I need to connect with the local church to be able to have a space for you to have that as an opportunity? I think you speaking up to the program that you're in is a great start, because it's already, the participants are there. And I truly want to believe that if you were to say this to the right person in that space as an idea that you would like to do, that they would be willing to help you to facilitate that. But to me, when you were saying that, I was like, oh, that sounds like a wonderful group, right? Where we can meet, and maybe it starts off very small, but that could absolutely grow. And this is the great thing about partnership and community partnership. If you wanted it to be something where it wasn't just at that facility, that you might be partnering with a local coffee shop, right? So that on a Saturday morning, you guys meet at the coffee shop, and now you are in public. It is very well lit. There are different smells. But start off with the program, I would say, and see if you can partner with them to allow some infrastructure and help around making something like that happen, and then see if it grows. And if you have, just by you asking that question, I would say to you, if you had the bandwidth, that partnering with other people that may be in that program with you that would want to create that space together. That's how a nonprofit is formed. 2 people gather and they say, hey, I know there's other people that do this and that would like to see something like this. You guys start meeting on Zoom, and then you start meeting in person, and now you have a full-blown nonprofit that's doing wonderful.
Students. I'm a loud talker, right? And I'm curious about, how do we do this work with like our colleagues or our families, and helping them to demystify or to challenge their biases about mental health and mental wellness and community care?
Disruptors.
Start talking. Don't be afraid to just say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I have a great example. So last year, I traveled out to California to present on a parent guide that was developed through William James College Asian Mental Health on helping Asian parents speak to their adolescents about racism and discrimination. And my mom came to hear me talk. And this is the first time ever that she has experienced me doing any of this. But we were sitting in the car going to the conference, and I had my students with me. And I could never talk to her about it, right? But she started to ask my students. And I'm listening, and I'm saying, and she's curious, and she's asking questions. Then she looked at me, she said, you experienced this growing up? And so from that conversation, I've continually had conversations with my mom. And then we met relatives, and she goes, did you know? And so from that, just starting to ask questions and being curious, we can start with our own family members, our own children. And I think that's just start from there. So let's not be afraid. And if they don't talk about it then you may have opened the doors to have them talk about it later.
Kind of drop seeds.
I think some of us sometimes have to just be courageous and share our own journeys with our family and friends, because we provide an opportunity for them to see both the struggle, but also see the resilience. And I think for many of our family members, they're afraid for us, right? They're afraid, they're worried, and what might look like rejection at times when it comes to having conversations about mental health is actually their anxiety and their fear showing up, and their sense of powerlessness that we're actually experiencing. So I think sometimes it requires someone to step forward and say, yes, I experienced depression in graduate school, and I continue to be successful. With the struggle comes resilience. And having done that in my own family, it's been fascinating to see over the years the ways in which that my willingness to step out in grace and to share my truth has then allowed for many family members to then share their truths. So that's one of my suggestions. Well, thank you all so much for having us and for being such an attentive audience. Thank you so much.
All right, let's keep that applause going for our wonderful panel. Thank you so very, very much for that information. Thank you. I am Daniela Harrigan. I'm with the Department of Mental Health. I'm also a theologian at BU School of Theology. So to hear the intersection of wellness and spirituality always warms my heart. So thank you. This is the part of the day that we're going to transition into our breakout sessions, but we're going to take a little break in between, so please feel free to get some food. There's a food station in the back of the sanctuary here. There's also food in our resource room, so please check out the resources that are there. We have a volunteer that is doing child care, I believe. If you're in here, can you raise your hand? If not, I have to figure out who they are. All right, great. I will coordinate with somebody later to make sure that that volunteer is here. Maybe they are elsewhere. And when we do take our break, and you need to know where you need to go, we are going to move the managing mental health. We are in the name, so why aren't we in the room? That will be here. So we'll do some moving around. Mental health and well-being among LGBTQIA+ groups. That will be downstairs in the Cooper Hall. So you'll go through here, past our lovely resource room, if you want to look in there before making your way downstairs. It is downstairs and it is the larger hall. And then finally, maternal minds matter, understanding and supporting maternal mental health. That will be in our classroom downstairs. So you will go through the large room downstairs, down the hallway, and it should be on your right-hand side. And for those who may have joined us later in the day, there are restrooms here on this floor. There's an accessible one, as well as gender-neutral restrooms, and downstairs there's restrooms as well. So thank you all for being here today. And, in the good spirit of the Black church tradition, if you've never been to a Black church, things happen when the Spirit moves. So let's take at least 5 minutes. If not, seek me out and I'll gather folks around, okay? And yes. You mean, yes, I do. To what time we're going to? Oh, I can tell you. Sure. So for the afternoon session, and we'll work on times, because again, I'm just, we go with the flow. So for Hope, Connection, and Wellness, that might either be here in the Connection Center, because we're trying to move things out of the Connection Center, which is our resource area, and the sanctuary will be open. So I'm led to believe that those sections will be here, but all the rest of the ones are the same. So mental health for all, promoting well-being will be in the large room downstairs, Cooper Hall. And then mind, body, spirit, and parenting and mental health will be in the classroom downstairs, okay?
It is my understanding that the ones that were supposed to be in the connection, the resource room, are going to be here now. Okay. So that's the only other change that was made. Are we good? I would say let the church say amen, but I recognize we are interfaith. So let's just say all is well. Is all well? Awesome. All right, now go ahead and take a break, get some food, congregate, make some community.